Hi, and welcome. Welcome to this, our second session on alternative proteins, where we're looking at finding the natural balance. My name is Wendy Hewitson, and I am the Agritech Program Manager for Barclays Eagle Labs. So as I said today's session is all around alternative proteins and finding the natural balance. So we have asked Eric Sikeros from Harper Adams University and Kieran Whitaker from Entocycle to join us to provide us some tips and tricks on the role of insects as a source of alternative protein in regards to the sustainability of the agricultural sector and the food supply chain. Now, the topics discussed are an overview of options for you to think about and to help with your independent research and business decisions. So they aren't intended as recommendations or advice. Please remember as well that your business has its own individual circumstances, so the statements and views expressed today may not be applicable or suitable for your business. So to begin with, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what Barclays Eagle Labs does, and then an overview of the Agritech programme and what we're looking at today, which is alternative proteins. So Barclays UK operates the UK's largest network of business incubators. Eagle Labs has a combined community of over 650 technology startups across its 25 UK locations. And Eagle Labs brings together a community of startups, innovators, industry specialists and mentors to help create a widely interconnected ecosystem. So we aim to support the acceleration of startups and transform those corporates and empower those future skills needed for the succession of a sector. So when you look at Eagle Labs itself and the UK, as I said, we have 25 physical sites. Now, these range from down in the Channel Islands, in Guernsey and Jersey, right their way up to Aberdeen, and with many, many sites in between. So what is the Agritech programme all about? What is our vision? So our vision is to accelerate the UK's agricultural industry's adoption of those emerging technologies, which are there to aim to increase the efficiencies across the food supply chain, right the way from field to fork, and even across sort of manufacturing and logistics. So from growing more food with less resources to the use of robotics for planting and picking, or demonstrating how AI can improve resilience, we're looking to empower the industry to make better decisions on how to improve their business for now and in the future. So Eagle Labs Agritech are delivering and tailoring a specific programme for the Agritech agri-food businesses by giving them access to the Eagle Labs network and the opportunities that that will bring. We were lucky enough in October 2020 to have a very special Eagle Lab open, and that's Eagle Lab Farm at University of Lincoln on the Rise Home campus. So like any other business incubator, it will offer hot working desks and offices and access to event space, but it also has a dedicated robotics lab. And if you think of that 200 hectares of land with its vegetable fields, fruit polytunnels, 5G enabled arable fields, livestock, and even a dummy supermarket pack house and supermarket refrigeration aisle, that literally is bringing awareness to the agritech community that Barclays wants to look at agritech as a sustainable ecosystem. So agritech, what is agritech? Agritech is the use of technology and technological innovation to improve the efficiencies and outputs of agriculture. It's the application of technology to improve all the elements of farming and growing processes, whether that's the use of IoT within sensors or drones, whether that's through AI, robotics, precision farming, soil health optimization, or even urban farming and CEA. But today, most importantly, we're looking at alternative proteins. So we all know the reasons why food is so important. The world population is expected to increase by a further 2 billion people in the next 30 years. That means going from around about 7.7 billion people on the planet to close to 9.7 billion in the year 2050. And it's estimated that we will require an additional 60 to 70% more food. So the food industry faces enormous systemic challenges. Further expansion of agriculture is not a viable solution to meeting the future needs because we're nearly using all of the land that's suitable for agriculture already. Currently, that protein fallback comes from a variety of plant sources, The green plants and grasses that cattle forage on and graze on have ample amounts of protein in them currently. The major protein source for prepared feed, such as soybean meal, and animals such as chickens and the aquaculture sector get theirs from that sort of area. The UK feed industry imports more than 70% of its maize, soya, and rapeseed requirements from each year. And significant quantities imported from places such as the USA may have GM significance. So we're looking at alternative protein, aren't we? Alternative protein sources are becoming more important for a sustainable food production system. Consumers are looking for more environmentally friendly products with lower impacts on animal welfare. Production of insect protein and lipids is seen as one solution, as insects can convert organic residues from food and feed side streams with high efficiency into a valuable food and feed product. Furthermore, this allows for the reuse of valuable nutrients and therefore the development of a circular economy within agriculture. So using insect protein instead of traditional ingredients, such as those grains and those soybeans for livestock or fish meal for fish, can or will reduce the impact on environmental issues. So insects are a replenishing, sustainable source of food. So by setting aside some of the larvae from each generation, there'll be new flies to lay new eggs and produce new flies. So I want to know more about how all this is done, and I'm sure you do as well. So we're really privileged today to have some of these experts join us, where they can tell you more about the R&D being undertaken in this fascinating area, and also hear from some of the new businesses and business models that are evolving and emerging into the marketplace. So for this, our second session on alternative proteins, we have Eric Siqueiros from Harper Adams and Kieran Whitaker from Entercycle to speak to us. So my first speaker, I'm going to hand over to Eric. Hello, Eric. How are you today?
Hi, Wendy. I'm okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. It's a real pleasure to be here, and we're looking forward to talk a little bit about the alternative proteins.
Lovely. Well, I'm not going to steal your thunder, Eric. I'm going to let you take it away and talk about the good work and the R&D that's been done at Harper Adams.
Okay, so yeah, thanks very much for having me here. Today, my presentation is going to be about the research that we have been doing at Harper Adams University over the last years. It will include a brief introduction, some of the research activities. I'm going to talk about the Alternative Proteins project that has been going on from a couple of years, and finally the Agri project, which is the project I'm currently working at. So Harper Adams University was founded in 1901, and it's set on a farm in Shropshire. It's a specialist university, and it's working to tackle the main challenges of the future, such as food production, processing, animal sciences, engineering, land management, and sustainable business. It has been awarded with several recognitions over the years, and it's well recognized for its teaching excellence framework. And Harper Adams University, it's a combination of different aspects, and as it is advertising in the website, it has a part, it considers itself as a part laboratory, which has great facilities, is a part farm being set up in a farm, so it adds value to what the students can learn and can do. It's a part invention hub and a think tank where we work with companies to develop and apply technology in the agri sector. And it's a part industry as well, so we can use the facilities to conduct pilot scale trials and develop new processes. So Harper Adams University has been interested in alternative proteins and in insects. So for humans, eating insects, we know that is not new. We probably have been doing it for a long time, or probably we have always been doing it. And currently, 1/3 of the population around the world include insects in their diet in some way. This is mostly in places like Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And the research that started in Harper Adams can go back to 2012, where it became the new center of excellence for entomology teaching and research in the UK. And that year, it welcomed its first entomology postgraduate students. And that started a whole interest among the university, and it has been permeated through marketing and other departments. For example, in 2015, the Edible Bug Challenge was launched, and it was a huge success. It took over 5,000 people on the first year, including BBC's DJ Scott Mills. The following year, in 2016, Harper Adams hosted the first entomology conference for teenagers. One of the presenters was Stefan Gates, and he delivered a session and a talk about entomophagy and how important it's going to be in the future. Furthermore, in 2018, a business student, Tom Evans, completed his dissertation into British public perception of eating insects. So he made a study among UK residents to try to see what are their perceptions and their attitudes towards this kind of alternative protein. Among his main findings was that people would be willing to try them if they are milled or mixed into a sort of flour. So people are not keen on trying insects by seeing them. So if they are part of something else, like a flapjack or something more usual or more common, people will be willing to try them. They will also be willing to try them if they were deemed as better for the environment, more sustainable, less greenhouse emission, and a smaller carbon footprint. And then another finding was that people will not replace the meat consumptions for insect. But I think that's not the point in this study or in other studies, because even in these places where insects are part of the diets, they don't completely replace the other kinds of protein. So it's just about having another option and having something else in the mix. His results were presented in the 3rd International Conference of Agriculture and Food in Urbanizing Society. And in 2019, Professor Frank Briscoe and Louis de Aguiar from the Food Technology and Innovation Department were involved in a project looking at researching the consumer enthusiasm for non-meat-based protein sources in different parts of the world. So this is an international collaboration trying to study the consumers and trying to focus more on the social science of the perception of alternative proteins, mainly focus on plant-based, cultured meat, and insect-based protein. So they are trying to find or to study the perceptions towards new food, towards the involvement of new food technology, the environmental issues, the health issues, and the perception and the willingness to engage. One of the first publications out of this project was a comparison between Spain and Dominican Republic, and they found that in the Dominican Republic, plant-based proteins were the best positioned alternative, and insects were the worst position. They also found that gender and education in the Dominican Republic were important factors, and gender, education, and age were the more significant factors in Spain. So they were already identifying what factors are important for people to decide if they are going to engage or not with alternative proteins. Following that up, that same year, they conducted another research, this time including United Kingdom and Brazil, with Spain and Dominican Republic, trying to understand the attitudes towards new food, new technologies, health, the perceptions of likely health and nutritional benefits of meat, the willingness to purchase, and the attitudes towards sustainability, among others. Once again, they found that the plant-based alternative was the more preferred in the 4 countries. However, cultured meat and insect-based also showed some interest. And actually, for the UK, insect-based was a little bit higher in the willingness to purchase. So once again, they have been trying to identify possible markets or attitudes for people to consume these types of proteins. Moreover, last year in 2020, they conducted another study, this time trying to find the drivers and the inhibitors for the acceptance of meat replacements. So they were studying the interactions between the food neophobia, food technology neophobia, nutritional importance, taste, texture, environmental influence, and healthiness in both insect-based protein and plant-based proteins. So they found that the consumer behavioral intentions towards these alternatives are inhibited by food neophobia, but they can also be augmented by the perceived suitability and benefits of the protein. These benefits, alternatives, being driven by the environmental impact, the healthiness, the nutritional importance, and the sensory attributes. They suggest that further research can be done in trying to understand whether food technology neophobia is a larger driver in a more technologically advanced meat alternatives, such as fungal-based protein and cultured meat. It's also unclear at the moment what role culture plays as a driver of the consumer attitudes toward these alternatives, whether people in low meat eating cultures would be less or more suitable to use them rather than high meat eating cultures. So this is something that could be studied in the near future. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Agri project, which is a partnership between Harper Adams University and Aston University. It's a part-funded project by the European Regional Development Fund, and it's a knowledge transfer that we work with SMEs from the areas of Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin, and mostly in the agri-tech and food and drink sector. So over the last couple of years, we've had several interactions, and we can summarize that the 4 main topics or projects we have been working with, all of them are in sustainable products and technology, such as waste valorization, zero waste initiatives. We have also worked with the food and drink manufacturing, working with companies in new product development or nutritional analysis, agri-tech prototype development, such as bench scale prototypes, and process improvement, which is value stream mapping and new process development, just to mention some. We've worked with 38 companies from the agri-tech sector and another 38 from the food and drink manufacturing sector. We have the Regional Food Academy in Harper Adams. So this is a facility where we can conduct several tests for food development and new product development. So we can do pilot scale trials, scaling up, sensory analysis. And we have a very well-equipped kitchen, so we have been using it for quite several projects. And regarding the entomophagy and alternative proteins, I've had the opportunity to work last year with a local farmer trying to farm insects for food, and this year we are also working with a company that's trying to develop products including insect proteins. So this is just a note from last year, I believe. So this is the farmer that is trying to diversify his business and including the insects. So that would be all for me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Eric. Really interesting to see so much good work going on, and not just with agri-tech businesses, but right across the board there. You mentioned to say that you're working with food and drink manufacturing, the agri-tech prototyping, process improvement, and obviously sustainability. So really, really interesting. Thank you, Eric. I'm now going to bring in my second speaker, which is Kieran Whitaker from Entocycle. So hello, Kieran, are you there?
Hi there, yes I am.
Hi Kieran, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm great, thank you very much.
Lovely. I'm really looking forward to find out what Entocycle's been doing. So again, I'm not going to take any more of the time. If you want to fire away, I'll love to hear more.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Kieran Whitaker and I'm the CEO and founder of Entocycle. So we focus on the technology to industrially scale insect production globally. We've developed proprietary technology to industrial insect farming, and we're tackling, well, one of the key aspects of doing this is to tackle both the kind of looming food protein crisis as well as the looming and current food waste crisis, to create localized versions of protein, fertilizers, and lipids that can go into a wide varying range of industries. So how do we do this? So our proprietary technology, we use the black soldier fly. And there's a key reason for using black soldier flies. Namely, they are the only non-disease, non-pest species that's been permitted to be used as feed and food in the UK and Europe. Of the species, they are the only fly species, which means that the important part of their life cycle means that the different parts of their life cycle, means that you can rapidly improve the production systems, unlike against other types of insects. And then key also is that they will be one of the few insects that can eat a very, very wide range of food waste, everything from, beer and coffee waste that we use in our pilot facility through to all types of, even more unsegregated waste streams in the future. Secondly, the most important part of this is that it takes between 9 and 14 days for them to grow from what is essentially a grain of sand up to about an inch-long protein bar, compared again with kind of 6 to 12 weeks for other species of insects. And then lastly, as previous speaker was giving, we can then break down those insects quite easily into their different fractionated parts, so the protein, the lipids, and then the byproduct, or the co-product, as we like to call it, is the biofertilizer or the frass. How do we do this? Well, we focus on 4 key areas. So we know that baking a cake is fundamental. To do that is to have all the ingredients at the correct proportions, and farming insects is no different. Now, it is quite easy to farm insects badly. It is really, really difficult to farm insects at scale, because what you're actually having to do is handle billions of the insects at their different life cycles, all the way through from flies to eggs, to hatching to larvae, and then back again to flies. And so we use these 4 key areas: IoT network, computer vision, robotic, and environmental control, to make sure that we can bake the perfect product every single time. Now, I'm just going to dive slightly into kind of a few of the key aspects here. So if we look at the black soldier fly eggs, so mating is actually one of the trickiest parts, if not the single trickiest part. Now, you have to get all stages correct, because it is quite difficult to make the adults mate at an optimum level. It's very easy to make 1 or 2 mate, or even a few 100,000, but to make millions, if not billions of them mate, is very difficult. So we have to use the right lighting, temperature, internal volume space, external volume space, age of the flies. All these characteristics we have to make sure that we can control accurately, to make sure that the optimal amount of those mate and lay the eggs in the optimal amount of time. Now, you can see here on the right, these are several grams of eggs across different ages. And again, that's really important, is that you're always having this circular production, so that never at any day do you have peaks or troughs. Every single day, 365 days a year, is the same production cycle. If we go into some of our valuable products, we'll talk about the protein. So we harvest the insects from the frass, and they can be ranging from about 34 to 58% protein with kind of commercially extraction processes to date. Now, there are several aspects that we can use. So the insects themselves can be either used fed live, as is now starting to happen in a few areas of the world, into the kind of lower value market segments. But really importantly, you've kind of got this natural ecosystem where chickens could be eating them. There are certain types of fish that are very, very happy to eat them. And that's a really important aspect, because there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution here to this global challenge. But here in the UK, you're more likely to be looking at a kind of post-process. So a dried, as you can see in the top right there, larvae meal, which again contains the lipids, it contains the fats, and it's a more complicated product for the current industrial feed production system. But again, it's really important for certain market segments. So, you know, weaner piglets, it could be very important for, because this is a very key natural part of their diet. And then lastly, in the bottom right corner, we have a raw fractionated insect meal. And again, depending on how you fractionate that, will generate different variants of refinedness. So that's the fineness of the product, which again is very important for some of the processing systems for making animal feed. And again, the protein quantity and the moisture content. So we're able to go through that entire supply chain from live insects all the way through to dried and fractionated. We're currently running scientific and commercial trials with different academic and commercial partners, all the way through from salmon through to kind of human and pet food products. The second really important one, often under kind of recognized areas, is actually the frass, so the better name for insect poo. The frass could be a really, really important fertilizer. So it's a homogeneous mixture of recycled organic substrate, so that's what the insects let out, exoskeletons and larvae casting. And that's really important, because actually it contains more than just the soil and the fertilizer. It's containing key items such as chitin and other kind of microbiological properties, which are really, really important for plants. So again, just to elaborate slightly on the chitin, as you see from the right, one of our academic partners, we are seeing with a 10% inclusion of our frass up to 100% wet weight growth in certain vegetables, which means that you get bigger plants without having to add any more kind of pesticides or fertilizers. This is in the beginning. It's really important to kind of stress here, it's not necessarily about the NPK. What we're talking about is a new potential product that helps the plants kind of prep their immune system so they can grow bigger, quicker and faster. And this is not just from the work we've been doing, but you can see this across other insect companies around the world and across Europe. And this not only just makes plants bigger, but you're seeing more fruiting bodies in fruit and vegetable species. And importantly, it's produced here, it's organic, it's peat-free, and there is possible in the future for hydroponics and fertilization, because we can use it as a water-soluble product. So there's a really key important aspect that it's not just about the protein and the lipids, but it's also about the fertilizer that can be created from this industry. Again, we're running commercial and second phase trials on both fruit trees and horticultural species in several sites across the UK, across a range of different plants. Because again, this is not just a single product fit here. There will be different uses of different fractions into different industries. Kind of lastly, I just want to touch on quite a bit of exciting information for us. So we led and won Innovate UK's probably largest agricultural grant to build the UK's first industrial factory. So Intercycle sit in the middle of quite a supportive cast of other companies to create this first industrial facility. It's a transformed and ambitious project, which is one of the reasons why Innovate UK was so happy to follow up and support us. It will prove that this industry is resource efficient and low emission, because again, we are producing it here in the UK. We're helping with localized food security, as well as ultimately challenging the food waste problem. And one of our key ambitions is to make the UK world leaders. Now, again, that's what are we going to be UK world leaders in, and maybe we can discuss this later on in some of the questions you have. But for us, it's all about the technology play. So whether we do this here or internationally, you know, it's still to be decided, but very much so we are building the UK's first industrial facility. As I said, we have a full support cast all the way ranging from supermarkets and feed companies, as well as salmon producers, as well as some of our kind of smaller partners and other insect companies in the space, and along with the likes of Durham, Warwick and Stirling universities who are conducting some of the academic science that underpins the commercial trials we're doing. And then underneath that, we're also working with the likes of AIC, FERA, and Zero Waste Scotland to be looking at the broader picture. So how can insects be fitting in across the whole spectrum of whether it's technology or waste recycling or ultimately food production. And it's a massive, possibly new industry. So Bitten by the Bug, your very own report back in, I think, 2018, has identified this as an $8 billion market opportunity, pound market, sorry, by 2030. And we hope to be the stimulating of an entire new industry here in the UK. So it's not just about ourselves doing this, but it's about being able to forge this wave forward. I sit on the task and finishing group for the I always forget the naming of it now. So the Insect Biomass Task and Finishing Group, where we've hedged our bets on a few times on the name, but we've identified the possibility of creating 3,500 jobs nearly directly in high-tech STEM industries. So this is all about also upskilling the UK kind of agricultural sector from what has typically been kind of low skill into and what is now becoming, as you know very much so, into a more high skilled kind of STEM industry. And again, we see this not just about being the UK, but it's about the export of IP products and technology. And there's going to be about 1.7 billion invested in this industry in the next kind of 2 to 3 years in Europe alone. We very much see ourselves as leading in this space in the UK, being able to help attract more of that, not just to ourselves, but to the kind of wider insect industry. And yeah, hopefully that's kind of covered all the bases. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. As I said, my name is Kieran Whitaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kieran. That was really interesting. I know a lot of us in lockdown are going on with baking cakes at home. So I quite like your analogy to get the perfect, obviously, proprietary ingredients and go through, IoT, computer vision, to bring out the perfect end product. Really, really interesting. I think I'll keep that analogy to myself. It was great. What I'd like to do now is actually bring back in Eric, because I've had quite a few questions actually emailed across to me. And I think having you as experts here today will be great to get your views on some of those questions. So I'm going to open the floor up, I think. Probably firstly with yourself, Eric. So many people can see the benefits of insect proteins in countries where there is, like poor land quality or critical water issues and things like that. Do you see there is a need for this type of farming in the UK?
Hi, well, yeah, that's a really good question. And yes, actually, I think I did mention this in my presentation that having this type of alternative protein is just to adding something else to the mix, to the availability of proteins. So even though that the UK has like a really good livestock industry, the environmental benefits that the rearing insects have, they could definitely help the UK overall, and especially thinking about the being zero net emissions for 2050. So it's definitely something that would help being more sustainable, getting proteins in a more sustainable way.
Going to just add to that, I think it's also really important is that, for example, with COVID and with Brexit, we're seeing more challenges of importing. So, the kind of export-import market is and it will continue to face more and more challenges as we become, less food secure in different regions. So I think, achieving, as you mentioned, I think earlier, about 70% of feed products are imported. That is a really fundamental issue to the country in the long term, especially if other regions start to face more challenging problems, whether that's kind of security in their population or in terms of environmental change affecting how they produce.
Just sort of linking back, maybe for both of you on this one, Eric, you mentioned neophobia. Now, that's a fear of anything new, or even an abnormal fear in some cases. What do you think it's going to take to change that sort of attitude and perception?
Yeah, I think that has been identified in several studies as one of the main barriers. As we mentioned before, even if there are some places in the world that they have been eating insects on a regular basis in their diets, For Europe and the United States and more Western countries, it's something that hasn't been done before. So always introducing a new product, and especially a food product, it can trigger this sense of fear. Well, neophobia actually means that they don't recognize this type of product as a normal product. So, for example, it was very interesting, this study about how eating them in another format, say flour, that could be an ingredient for bread or for a flapjack, that could start changing the perception of the public, because then you will be having that protein in a more familiar product, and then you're going to start from there. Obviously, highlighting all the benefits of it, the environmental benefits of using this type of ingredient, that the normal ingredients.
Yeah, and I think from yourself, Kieran, then, what areas are you seeing the most engagement from? Is it directly with the farming clientele? Is it with communities? Is it societal? Or is it kind of the larger manufacturing that's got a real grasp or willingness to take this on?
I think we're starting to see both kind of bottom up and the top down approach to it. So the kind of supermarket chains and the big food groups, they are looking at the bigger, longer term issue that soy and fish meal is having, resource constraints or environmental regulation. And so I think that you're starting to see this positive downward push onto industry. And then similarly, from the kind of bottom up, you're starting to see now brands, whether it be human, pet food, animal feed, they're really starting to push the UK produced or sustainable, or we're going to be moving towards a more flex diet society, and more vegetarianism, more veganism. It's one of the growing trends. It just is a direction of travel that will happen, and most of that is going to be in, as Eric said, is going to be in that flexitarian area. So people who are wishing to, once or twice a week try something different from their traditional diet. It actually, when you add all those 1-2 days up a year, it's a massive number, and actually can be one of the key drivers of bringing down our kind of global and individual carbon footprint.
Right. So taking that one step further, who do you see are going to be the major influencers or enablers to make this technology both commercial and a reality? Probably come to yourself first, Eric, on that one.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a task that is not going to depend of just one sector. I think it has to be a combination of, as Kieran said, like the research, the farming community, the retailers, and the food developers. Because at the end of the day, it has to be a combination of all, and it has to be done in such a way that the message can get to the people that trying these new products will represent an advantage, and it's a really good alternative for these new trends that have been emerging over the last years. People trying to move away, if not entirely, at least move away of so much consumption of meat. So having the right type of products and explaining why it is important would be a key move to increase the demand of these products.
Yeah, so Kieran, obviously you've mainly at this time sort of concentrated, as you said, on the animal food supply chain, looking at the lipids and the frass all individually. What sort of area do you see the most growth perhaps coming for your sector and for that type of productivity?
I think that's really going to come down to how legislation plays out in terms of which market sectors you can go in. So Europe, because of its kind of dependence on imports, moved the legislation first. So in 2017, they deregulated for aquaculture, and it's already been allowed in pet for a while. You've now seen with the Novel Food Act last year that insects in certain forms can be used to feed humans, but we've got this kind of crisscrossing legislative platform that we're not quite sure which market sector will enable it first. So I think very much, as I said, our we kind of see ourselves more as the enabler. We are the technological developers. Nobody today can go off and buy an insect factory off the shelf, because you can't even buy individual pieces of equipment. And that's where we very much see ourselves fitting in. We will be producing products for certain market segments, but ultimately this is going to be, it's going to be a licensing game, and it's going to be different pieces of equipment, different pieces of technology into various different parts of the world at different kind of automation levels, because you see a very difference between the kind of the UK existing farming sector versus possibly a Swiss one, where the, salaries are higher and the workforce in this area is slightly lower compared to an East Africa country, where again labor wages are much lower, and so you're looking at much less automation. But fundamentally, you still need certain pieces of equipment, whether it's a tractor and you're ploughing the fields, or it's a hyper automated carbon harvester in the US. You've always got this kind of similar backbone technologies. So for us, I think the lie of the land is not absolutely straight yet, but because we already have the aquaculture industry here in the UK, and because we already have very progressive kind of pet food industry companies already with brands on the shelves that you can buy today, they're going to be the first movers.
Fab. So that kind of leads into one that I've just been sent through, which I think is one that's often asked by everybody. If there's one thing that you would want to change to ensure that sustainability and the success of the alternative proteins, what would this be? Eric, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, I think Kieran mentioned something very important, and I didn't mention it before, but the legislation would play a very important role in the implementation of all these new products and processes. And I think at the moment it needs to really take it into consideration and really explore, and should be something that helps this kind of proteins, because at the moment I think it's kind of working the other way around. So the technology and all the things that Kieran is doing, it's great. All the research we've seen, there's a really good amount of research, but there's still something else missing, that is putting everything together with the legislation and with the other companies, and make it available for everyone.
Have you anything to add on that, Kieran?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to echo and kind of even project that a bit further. The UK and Europe were, as I said, first movers, and over the last kind of 3 years, we've gone from first place to last place in terms of how open and how forward-looking. This is going to be a huge multi-billion-dollar industry, a multi-million-dollar industry. Whether we do it here or not, it's going to happen over the next kind of 2 to 10 years. And so the UK is in a unique position right now in kind of its global positioning, let's say, for lack of a better word, to move first, because all alternative protein sources have a very defined, or will have a very defined set of legislation that they have to go through. Insects sit in this kind of currently blurred space between farmed animals and alternative protein sources, and so we need that clarified to enable this industry to really roll out. So yeah, Eric kind of hit it nail on the head. It is a legislation play right now in the UK.
Fine, that's absolutely fabulous. One question that's been sent in, which is probably more aimed directly at you, Kieran, as in, what piece of advice, or what one piece of advice would you give yourself if you were setting up as a new startup entering into this exciting area of agri-tech?
2 pieces of advice. One, the smaller piece of the supply chain that you can try and fix or improve, the better. So if you try and go for an entire full chain, as we are, it's, the opportunity is much larger, but actually your kind of route to commercializing physical products takes a long time, no matter which way you look at it. So if you have a more focused approach, it's probably an easier step to make. However, the real fundamental changes are going to be made looking at that entire supply chain and those entire new input streams. And I think the second one is be prepared to not know the path. I mean, I think today's a great example. It's snowing outside. I don't know how hard it is where you are, but often there is no direct, clear path, because it looks at, starting companies a bit like walking across a complete snowfield. And you have to really forge that path for yourself. Now, there are kind of checkposts and signposts that you kind of can eventually see, But the ultimate is you turn around, look behind you, and realize actually that was such an obvious route to take. And then you get to that point again where you have to make those decisions. So it's that having that kind of perseverance, stubbornness, and self-belief that will really kind of help you push you through.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. I say it is really, really heartwarming to see that this is happening now, and that we are getting to grips with this with technology companies like yourself, with Entocycle, and the research, development and support that Harper Adams are giving. And that's really invaluable for me to see as part of our Agritech program. So I would love to thank you guys again for your time and your energy and your openness and frankness, honesty, right across the board regarding what we've talked about, alternative proteins. And is this going to be a UK-wide ecosystem that's going to take the lead globally? That's a question for another day, I think. So thank you guys for your time. As I mentioned, I am the Agritech Program Manager for Barclays Eagle Labs, and we put these events on to try and help you understand what's going to be happening next, or what's even happening now within the sector. So shortly there will be a QR code comes up on your screen, and we'd really appreciate it if you would scan that QR code and feed back to us what you thought of today's session, also what you would like to see more of, because our next session, or session 3 within the alternative proteins, is all around, are you insect curious? And that will go more into depth on, as we say, the human food chain element of alternative proteins. So again, thank you very much, Kieran. I've loved hearing about Entocycle, and I'm going to be watching you very closely and see if policy follows suit. And again, yourself, Eric, thank you so much. As I say, I love to see the work that Harper Adams and the Agri project are doing. So guys, thank you once again.
Thank you very much for having us. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.